The fluorescent lights of the Transit Authority archives buzzed overhead as Thomas Matterhorn hunched over his tablet, scrolling through yet another missing persons report. 3 years since his forced retirement, and here he was, still haunting his old workplace like one of the ghosts from the urban legends he was investigating. "You're just chasing shadows again," Tom, his former colleague Helen, had warned him earlier that day. But she didn't understand. She hadn't seen the pattern he'd found: 23 disappearances in the past month alone, all between 2:45 and 3:15 a.m., all near stations along the unmarked gray line that didn't officially exist. The line that had taken Claire. Thomas pulled his wife's note from his wallet, its edges worn soft from countless readings. "I'm sorry. I have to know the truth. Taking the last train tonight, 2 years had passed," and those words still made no more sense than the morning he'd found them on their kitchen counter. He minimized the missing persons database and opened his old work files. As former head of transit route optimization, he'd memorized every tunnel, every track, every scheduled maintenance window in the Megacity's sprawling subway system. But the gray line, the ghost line as conspiracy theorists called it, defied logic. It appeared on no official maps, yet maintenance crews serviced its stations. It had no published schedule, yet cleaners swept its platforms. And every night at 3 a.m., security cameras throughout the system went dark for exactly 17 minutes. Thomas's tablet chimed with an alert from one of his monitoring programs. Another maintenance request logged for the Phantom track, this time for Platform 13 at Central Station. He'd traced similar requests back 6 months before they vanished into encrypted servers, but this one was different. It mentioned a signal calibration, the exact phrase that had appeared in Claire's browser history the night she disappeared. His hands trembled as he pulled up the surveillance feeds from Central Station. The platform looked abandoned, but he'd been watching long enough to notice the subtle signs: the way certain passengers lingered near the farthest end, how they carefully avoided eye contact while performing what looked like casual gestures, adjusting a scarf, checking a watch, touching their left shoulder twice. Tonight would be different. Tonight, he'd finally decoded their silent language. Thomas packed his tablet and stood, his joints protesting the movement after hours of stillness. The archive's time display read 2:17 a.m. If he hurried, he could make it to Central Station before the next ghost train arrived. He patted his pocket, checking for the small notebook where he'd documented every detail of his investigation. If anything happened to him, at least someone would know where to look. As he stepped into the empty corridor, the fluorescent lights flickered. For a moment he could have sworn he saw Claire's reflection in the glass of a framed transit map, her dark eyes serious, her hand reaching out in that familiar way. But when he turned, there was only his own tired face staring back. "I'm coming," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to Claire or the mysteries of the ghost line itself. Either way, he knew that after tonight he'd finally have answers or join the ranks of the disappeared himself. The night air bit at his face as he emerged from the Transit Authority building. Above him, the Megacity's towers stretched into the smog-stained sky, their endless lights creating the illusion of a starless galaxy. Somewhere in that maze of steel and shadow, a train was waiting. And this time, Thomas Matterhorn would be on it. Central Station's vast marble halls echoed with Thomas's footsteps as he made his way to Platform 13. At this hour, the usual crush of commuters had dwindled to scattered shadows: a janitor pushing his cart, a few late shift workers hurrying home, and there, at the platform's far end, 3 people standing unnaturally still. 2:57 a.m. Thomas positioned himself near a cracked pillar, watching as one of the waiting passengers performed the sequence he'd memorized: left shoulder touch, watch check, scarf adjustment. His heart pounding, he mimicked the gestures. A woman in a charcoal gray coat glanced his way, her expression unchanging save for the slightest nod. The platform lights dimmed. No announcement preceded the train's arrival. It simply emerged from the tunnel like a ghost materializing through a wall, its silver surface unmarred by the graffiti that decorated other trains. No Transit Authority markings. No advertisements. Just pristine, gleaming metal that seemed to swallow the station's weak light. The doors whispered open. Thomas stepped inside, fighting the urge to run as memories of Claire overwhelmed him. The car's interior was nothing like the utilitarian designs he'd approved during his tenure. Instead of hard plastic seats, there were plush charcoal benches. The lighting was soft, almost intimate, emanating from hidden sources, and the air it smelled fresh, like spring rain rather than the metallic tang of recycled subway air. The other passengers entered silently, dispersing to different seats without acknowledging each other. Thomas counted 7 people total, including himself. The woman in the gray coat sat near the front. A businessman with a silver briefcase chose the middle, and a young couple settled in the back, their fingers interlaced. The doors closed with a sound like a caught breath. As the train began to move, Thomas pulled out his tablet, checking their position against his mental map of the system. They started normally enough, following the old B-line tunnel, but then impossible. They were turning west where no track existed, descending at an angle that should have brought them into the megacity's foundation. "I wouldn't bother with that," a voice said softly. The businessman had moved to sit across from him, his briefcase balanced on his knees. "Electronics tend to get unreliable where we're going." As if on cue, Thomas's tablet screen flickered and died. He looked up to find other passengers watching him now, their earlier pretense of ignorance abandoned. "First time?" the businessman asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "I'm looking for someone," Thomas said. "My wife, Claire Matterhorn. She took this train 2 years ago." The temperature in the car seemed to drop. The young couple exchanged glances. The woman in the gray coat turned away. "Then you should know," the businessman said, "that once you complete this journey you can never go back. Those are the rules." Thomas leaned forward. "What rules? Who makes them?" "I designed half the tunnels in this city, but we're traveling through sections that don't exist." A deep rumble surrounded them as the train plunged deeper. The lights dimmed momentarily, and when they brightened again, frost had formed on the windows. "You designed what they wanted you to design," Mr. Matterhorn, the woman in the gray coat, called from her seat. "But there have always been other architects, other plans. Your wife understood that. You knew Claire." The woman's response was cut off by a sudden lurch. The train was ascending now, the pressure change making Thomas's ears pop. Through the frosted windows, he caught glimpses of vast, illuminated spaces, caverns that shouldn't exist beneath the megacity streets. "Welcome to the Ghost Network," the businessman said, opening his briefcase. Inside was not the expected collection of documents, but a series of glowing crystals arranged in a pattern Thomas recognized from his old transit maps. "Your wife helped us expand it. The question is, are you ready to learn why?" The train entered another impossible turn, and as the lights flickered again, Thomas saw something through the windows that made him press his hands against the glass in disbelief. Beyond the frost, beyond the elaborate network of unauthorized tunnels, an underground world stretched out before them, and at its center, a city of lights that rivaled the metropolis above. They were headed straight for it. The crystalline city grew larger in the frost-rimmed windows, its spires reaching up toward a cavern ceiling that sparkled with embedded lights, a mirror of the smog-hidden stars above the mega-city. Thomas pressed his forehead against the cold glass, his urban planner's mind struggling to process the scale of what he was seeing. "Impossible," he whispered. "The geological surveys, the foundation studies, were all falsified," the woman in the gray coat said, now standing beside him. "My name is Dr. Helena Reed. I was the lead geologist who helped your wife expose the truth." She pulled a data crystal from her pocket identical to those in the businessman's briefcase. "These aren't just decorative, Mr. Matterhorn. They're what powers everything you see out there. And they're what powers the megacity above, too." The businessman cleared his throat. "Allow me to introduce myself properly. Marcus Vale, former energy administrator for the upper city. What they don't tell the public is that the megacity's endless power doesn't come from fusion reactors or solar arrays. It comes from human biological energy harvested from the citizens themselves." Thomas felt the blood drain from his face. "That's why the city never sleeps." "Exactly," Helena said. "The perpetual motion, the mandatory overtime, the endless entertainment venues, it's all designed to keep people moving, generating kinetic and neural energy that's collected through the streets, the buildings, even the air filtration system. The megacity is a giant battery, and its citizens are the fuel cells. The train began to slow as it approached the underground city's outskirts. Through the windows, Thomas could see gardens illuminated by crystal light, hydroponics farms stretching along the cavern walls, and hundreds of people moving freely through wide streets. Claire discovered the energy siphoning program while analyzing transit power consumption, Marcus explained. She couldn't understand why the system was drawing more power during rush hours than the trains were using. Then she found the neural collection nodes hidden in the handrails, the seats, the turnstiles. She tried to warn me, Thomas said, remembering late nights when Claire had pored over energy reports, her face drawn with worry. But I was too focused on efficiency metrics, on keeping the trains running on time. I was part of the problem. Helena's expression softened. She knew they were watching her. That's why she couldn't tell you everything. But she helped us expand this. She gestured to the approaching city. We call it Haven. It's powered by the geothermal energy that the megacity pretends doesn't exist. No human batteries required. The train glided into a station that made the marble halls of Central Station look shabby by comparison. Crystal pillars pulsed with soft light, and the air smelled of growing things, real plants, not the synthetic fresheners used above. As the doors opened, Thomas saw a familiar figure standing on the platform. Her dark hair had more gray than he remembered, and new lines creased the corners of her eyes, but her smile was exactly as he recalled. Claire, he breathed. She stepped forward, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Thomas. I wanted to tell you everything, but they were monitoring us. I had to protect you and our work here. She gestured to the station around them. Welcome to the Resistance. The other passengers began to disembark, each carrying small bags containing what looked like their whole lives. Thomas realized they were all refugees, chosen carefully, brought down to strengthen Heaven's population. We're developing a plan, Claire said, taking his hand. The megacity's authorities are getting closer to discovering us. We've detected their deep scanning equipment, but we have something they don't expect. She squeezed his hand. We have you, the man who knows every tunnel, every weakness in their transport system. If you're willing to help. Thomas looked back at the train, thinking of all the nights he'd spent searching for answers. Now he had them, but they came with a weight he never expected. The choice before him wasn't just about reuniting with Claire, it was about justice for millions of unknowing citizens above, trapped in an endless cycle of exploitation. Show me everything, he said, turning back to his wife. Show me how to tear their system down. 3 months after his arrival in Haven, Thomas stood in the underground city's control center, surrounded by holographic displays of the megacity's transit system. Each line glowed with real-time energy data, showing the constant drain of human energy being siphoned from unsuspecting citizens above. The latest projections, Mr. Matterhorn said, a young engineer, handing him a crystal data slate. The megacity's scanning equipment will reach the outer caverns within 2 weeks. Claire joined him at the central display, her fingers intertwining with his. We're running out of time. Thomas nodded, studying the intricate web of tunnels he'd helped design, now seeing them with new eyes. The ghost line was never just an escape route, was it? You built it to be a skeleton key. Waiting for the right locksmith, Claire smiled. Your transit system optimization protocols, they weren't just about efficiency. They created predictable patterns, vulnerabilities we can exploit. The control room buzzed with activity as Haven's engineers and technicians prepared for what they'd dubbed Operation Daybreak. Thomas's knowledge of the transit system had proved invaluable, revealing weak points in the megacity's energy collection grid that could be systematically disabled. Dr. Reed's team is in position, Marcus Vale announced, entering with his briefcase of power crystals. The first wave of transport pods is ready. Thomas turned to the assembled team. The megacity's power grid is built on patterns I created. Every morning at 5:47 a.m., there's a 3-second diagnostic pulse through all major lines. He pointed to key junctions on the map. That's when the grid is most vulnerable. If we inject Heaven's geothermal energy into these nodes simultaneously, we'll overload their collection systems, Claire finished, creating a cascade of safety shutdowns. And in that darkness, Helena added, we launch every Ghost Line train we have. Not just one train at 3 a.m., but dozens, arriving at every major station in the city. Thomas traced the escape routes they'd planned. The authorities will be too busy dealing with the power crisis to stop the evacuations, but we'll only have a 90-minute window before their backup systems engage. 90 minutes to save a city, Marcus mused. Those transport pods can move 500 people each, if we time it right. We'll still be leaving millions behind, Thomas said quietly. Claire squeezed his hand. For now. But once we establish these evacuation routes, they'll never be able to seal them all. The Ghost Line will become a legend of hope instead of disappearance. Warning lights flashed across the control room displays. Above them, the cavern ceiling trembled as deep scanning pulses probed from the city above. They're ahead of schedule, Helena reported. The scanning equipment, they must have improved its range. Thomas straightened, years of transit crisis management taking over. Move up the timeline. Start the evacuations tonight. I'll coordinate from here while Claire leads the first wave. He turned to his wife. Just like old times, you in the field, me watching the signals. Claire kissed him quickly. See you on the other side of dawn. As Haven's evacuation teams mobilized, Thomas took his position at the central console. Around him, the underground city hummed with purpose. On the displays, he could see thousands of dots representing people above, moving through their night routines, unknowingly powering the system that enslaved them. Begin Operation Daybreak, he commanded. Let's show them where the last train really goes. The cavern lights pulsed as Haven's geothermal power built to critical levels. On every platform of the Ghost Line, trains waited in shadow. Thomas thought of all the nights he'd spent searching for answers about the mysterious 3 a.m. train. Now he understood it had never been about the destination. It had been about the choice to seek something better, the courage to step into the unknown. As the first power surge reached the megacity's grid, Thomas watched the familiar patterns of his old transit system begin to change. In the darkness that followed, thousands would find their way to freedom. The Ghost Line would run not just in shadow now, but in light, carrying hope through tunnels built for control. The last train to nowhere, it turned out, had been heading somewhere all along. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.